Hello again, everyone. Lynette Farr here again. This is the second video in our book study series, our three-part video series, in which we are discussing the reading comprehension book, but I am not a reading teacher. Strategies for Literacy Instruction in the Content Areas by Amy Benjamin. Now, in the first video, I went over an overview of the book, what all is contained in the book. So feel free to check out that video if you haven't already. You can find the link to that video in the information section below this video, and I'll also put the link for the third video in the series, which is on Chapter 5, the during reading strategies. I'll put those links in the information section below, so feel free to check those out at your convenience. In this video, though, we're going to talk about the fifth chapter of the book, the chapter on the before strategies, the before reading strategies. These are strategies that students can use before they do their reading. So strategies they can use before reading. So just as a side note, it's important to remember that students should only use one strategy for any given passage of text. Okay, so it's better if they just use one strategy at a time. So first, the author talks about the strategy of establishing a purpose for reading. So if you were to ask your students what is the purpose of your reading, they probably would not be able to answer you. And sometimes you may have a hard time trying to decipher that yourself for your own reading. But reading can be divided into three categories in terms of purpose. So we have skimming, so skimming the text. We have scanning, and we also have close reading. And remember what I said when I said that you should only use one strategy per given piece of text? Well, the strategy of purpose, here the strategy is purpose. The categories of based on purpose are skimming, scanning, and close reading. So you can actually use all three of those categories together, but you would only want to use the one strategy of purpose. Okay, I hope that makes sense. When we're talking about skimming, we use skimming to get an overview of the text. So we need to establish a basis of knowledge before we read too closely. We need to decide if the text is even worth reading. And if we can also use skimming if all we need to do is get a general idea of the information that's given in the text. And I'm sure as adults we probably use this technique quite often. You probably don't even realize sometimes that you're using it, and students probably use it too and don't realize that they're doing that. But it is important. It's an important strategy to learn so that they can refine how they're using it. Now, this can be an effective strategy used for informational text, like with textbooks. But things like fiction and poetry, those aren't really written to be skimmed. Fiction and poetry, if you use skimming for these types of reading, you're really denying yourself of the main intent that the author was trying to get across. So those are really meant to be read more closely. Now, moving on to scanning. Scanning is quote-unquote looking up, okay? So the purpose of scanning is to locate specific information to answer a question. We've all done this. We, have students answer the questions in the back of the chapter, or get the definition out of your textbooks for these vocabulary words. And when they do that, hopefully they are using the strategy of scanning to do this. According to the author, the best way to scan is to use the index or table of contents. And not all students will do that. And we've probably all seen this in our classrooms. An inefficient reader will flip back and forth in their text instead of using the tools that they've been provided, the contents, table of contents, and the index. They will just flip, and try to find the answers that way through the whole chapter instead of going back to their table of contents or their index to find what page whatever they're looking for is on. Now, efficient readers will use the tools that they're given, the index, the table of contents, as well as like bookmarkers, sticky notes, any textual notations that they've wrote down to help them find information easier next time. So these are also features of this strategy that they can also practice doing to help them as they move on using the strategy. Students, like I said, they probably don't even realize that they're using this strategy while they're doing an activity. They do one activity that they probably use this activity quite often for, and they don't even know, and that's searching the internet. When they use a search engine of some sort, they type in their keyword and they search, and as they're going down through their results, they're scanning for keywords to decide if the link that popped up is what they were intending to get. And as we all know, we don't always get the intended links that we were hoping for. So as you're kind of scanning through, you don't click on each link to go find out. You scan the information that's given there with that link to see if that's what you're wanting. And as the world increasingly gets dependent upon technology and computers and the internet, this strategy of being able to scan for information becomes more and more important every day. So that's something that even though they probably have been doing, they don't even realize they're doing it, but they can always improve with this strategy. Finally, we have close reading. Now, close reading, many of you who teach reading probably are already familiar with this strategy. I know we've used it before in the school that I teach at and the school that probably some of you teach at. Close reading is the kind of reading that is needed for reading comprehension, reading comprehension tests, for literature that has an obscure, ambiguous meaning, or meanings that can be interpreted in more than one way. So reading that is not straightforward, they would need to use close reading. Additionally, reading that is lengthy or has a high complexity would require this strategy. You and your students may be wondering, just what are the purposes for reading? Okay, and there's many purposes for reading, and some of these purposes the author lays out for us in her book. And some of the examples of that are to find out specific information, define a term, get a general overview, they reading for clarification, reading to understand the writer's perspective. And there's lots and lots of different purposes for reading. Maybe it's just for fun. Maybe you're reading for entertainment. But it's important that we try to define the purpose for our reading. That is a strategy that that we need to practice. Now, the next strategy discussed in Chapter 6 is previewing. So previewing is also done quite often by us and probably our students as well. Previewing, you do a preview of text when you look at the cover of a book. The old saying, and the author mentions this in the book, you can't judge the book by its cover, but we often do. If we're looking for a fictional book and we see something on the cover that sparks our interest, it'll motivate us to read further into the book, maybe read the jacket, or maybe go ahead and buy the book, or check the book out and go ahead and read it. So we've already previewed some idea. If there's a fictional book and it has a dragon on the outside, we're going to go ahead and have a preconceived idea that something in the book has to be about dragons. So when we preview things, we're looking at certain parts of the text. Graphical information and art, typographical features that direct your attention, summary information, placement of the main idea within the text. So those are some things that you'd be looking for while previewing. This previewing strategy can be used for textbook reading, and the textbooks are rich in new information. So this strategy of previewing helps students to know how long it should take to read a passage of text. Initially, what the text is going to be about, just by reading the title and the main ideas throughout the text. And by looking at maps and charts and graphs and tables and photos, they can get an overview idea of what the chapter or the passage is about. So those are ways that we preview our text for information. Okay. Now, finally, in chapter 5, it discusses the before strategy of activating prior knowledge. Now, prior knowledge is very important when reading, okay? This strategy of activating or using prior knowledge is used to figure out the meaning of a text or passage. So if you think about it, it's so much easier to understand new information about any given subject that you're already familiar with. If you're familiar with the vocabulary, with the subject matter, with abstract concepts, and any other assumptions that the author makes about their readers' ability to understand the information given. So if you have prior knowledge about these things, it's going to be making reading this new information that you're about to read a lot easier to understand. The author, Amy Benjamin, she reveals in the book in chapter 5 her favorite strategy for activating prior knowledge for secondary students as a form of what she calls verbal brainstorming. Now, what she does is she likes to ask students to break up in groups of 3, and then she asks them to exchange the information they already know about the topic that they're about to read about. And she says this should take no more than about 3 minutes, so to keep the conversations focused. And then after the 3 minutes is up, then you, the teacher, you should relate back to the class some of the words and the ideas that you heard as they talked. So she refers to this strategy and this activity as quote-unquote buzzback. So she really enjoys that activity. It's something that you can try in your classroom and see how it works. This chapter 5, does include some mini lessons, scenarios, examples, and analyses throughout the book that gives you ideas and examples of how the strategies are used in certain situations, and kind of puts it into real world scenarios for you. And just to recap, the before strategies chapter 5 in But I'm Not a Reading Teacher, strategies for learning, for literacy instruction in the content areas. The before strategies are establishing a purpose for reading, previewing, and activating or using prior knowledge. Okay, so I hope that this video has sparked some questions and comments about the book. And again, the book is But I'm Not a Reading Teacher, Strategies for Literacy Instruction in the Content Areas, written by Amy Benjamin. And if you do have comments or questions, please feel free to post them down below the video in the comment section. I'm excited to see what kind of conversations we can have about this really useful book on reading comprehension. So please click the link below for the third video, and the third video is the final video in this book study. The third video recaps chapter 6 of the book. Then chapter 6 is on the during strategies, the during reading strategies. And the link below for the first video, if you haven't already seen that, will also appear in the information section below. So thank you for watching, and I'm excited for our conversations about the book. See you in the next video.